Hi everybody! In this video I'm going to go through an introduction to Lab 4, which is about lists. So in this lab you will start with some data about soccer seasons, and you're going to figure out all the possible records that could have happened from that information. So as we can see here, a win is always worth 3 points, a tie is always worth 1 point, and a loss is always worth 0 points. But you're only going to know how many games were played and how many points were earned in the season. And so you're going to figure out all the possible combinations of wins, ties, and losses. So you get to start with some code. Let's just go ahead and save that. And I'll replace it. And we can see that we actually get a little hint here that wherever we see the pass keyword, that's where we would like to fill in our code. We can assume that there will always be at least one legal combination of wins, ties, and losses. And there is a example output for the data that comes in the lab. So I'm going to open idle and let's take a look. Alright. Oh, that was a new file. We want to open a file, and that is lab 4. Alright, so we saw that we're going to need to replace these pass keywords with our code. So you at least have that hint. But to start off, let's just run this and see what happens. Okay, so as of right now, this code runs, but it doesn't do anything, which is totally fine because it's our job to fill it in. So let's look at main first. I think that's always a good place to start. So we see that what we receive as input are these lists, these soccer seasons, and this soccer seasons variable is a nested list. So it's a list of lists. There are 4 lists here inside the list. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each of these sublists consists of 2 items. The first one is the number of games, and the second one is the number of points. And so if we were to look at this first example, we see that there's 1 game was played and 3 points were earned. And so let's actually just write ourselves a little comment here to remind ourselves what were those point values. Well, a win is worth 3 points, a tie is worth 1 point, and a loss is 0 points. So we can immediately look here and know that the only possible thing that could have happened was that because there was only 1 game, it had to be 1 win, right? So season 1 had 1 game, 3 points, so must have been 1 win. But you can imagine that as we get more games and more points, there might be more than 1 combination. And in fact, let's take a look at the sample output. So our program is going to need to produce the output here. And so just like we said, season 1, there was 1 game, 3 points, and so that means that there was 1 win, 0 ties, 0 losses. But if we look at that 4th game, there were 20 games and 30 points, and we can see that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different combinations of wins, ties, and losses that could have yielded 30 total points. Alright, So we saw what the soccer seasons variable is, and we see that we then call the process seasons function on soccer seasons. So let's see what process seasons does. Oh, well, so far it's doing nothing, right? So this here takes in a nested list of season information, and as of right now, we don't know what we need to do in here, right? But we see that there's this other code, this function definition here, that it looks like we don't ever call this process season. And we can just double check that by searching, do we ever call this? And nope, we never call it, right? So we never call process season, but we can make a good guess that, well, process seasons needs to call process season for each season in here, right? And so what are we going to need to do inside process seasons for each season in seasons, right? We're going to need to do process that season, and maybe there's already a function for this. So we're not currently calling process season, but it would be a good idea to do that. And we can note here that process season takes in 3 parameters: the season, the games played, and the points earned. So games played and points earned seem pretty clear because we know that these sublists contain the games played and the points earned. But what is this season variable? To me, I would say it's not super clear. And so what I would do is I would actually look at, okay, where does this season variable get used? And maybe we can use our search functionality here. And we see that, where does it get used? Well, it gets used in this print statement. This print statement here. And so let's look at our output and what our output is supposed to be. We're supposed to say season 1, report the number of games played in season 1, the number of points earned in season 1, and then print all the possible win, tie, loss records. Then for season 2, we print season 2, games played, points earned, etc. Then season 3, season 4. And so it looks like, what is this season variable? Well, that is going to be the sort of index of the season. So when we're processing this data, we should have season be equal to 1, this data season should be equal to 2, etc. And so we might just write a comment here that says season variable is the index of the season we are currently processing. Just to remind ourselves. And so we're going to then need to put in this place the logic that will take this games played and this points earned and figure out all those combinations. So to start off, I would say a good very first thing to do is to make sure that we can actually call process season for each season. And so I think that's a good thing for us to do together. So if I want to iterate over all of these, iterate over each season in soccer seasons, what am I going to need to use? Well, definitely a for loop. And my first instinct might be to do something like for season in seasons, just like I wrote in my comment here. Because then, what do I have? Well, season will take the value of each of these lists. So maybe let's just actually go ahead and print what is season if I iterate over seasons. Let's just go ahead and run. And just as we expected, let's just scooch this around. Just as we expected, the first time through this loop, season is 1, 3, the list 1, 3. Second time, it's the list 1, 1. Third time, 1, 0, etc. So we're iterating through each element in this list. However, if we then wanted to call process season, we wouldn't have that season variable, right? Because I need to be able to count up these seasons as I process them. So this is season 1, season 2, etc. And so there are a number of ways that I could do this. I could introduce a new variable, something like season count. I could start it at 1, and I could pass in season count here, and then I could pass in what? Season at 0 using my list indexing, because I need to pass in that 1 here as my games played, and I could pass in season at 1 as my points, season 1 points. And then what would I need to do? I would need to increment season count, because the next time through the loop, I need season count to be 2, right? So this is one solution. That would be a totally reasonable solution. And so now we do see that if we do that, we get our season 1 here, season 2 here, season 3 here, and we're getting the correct games played, points earned for each season. But one thing I wanted to show you is how to use the range function to count up these season numbers, because range is going to be very useful for you in this lab, so just want to make sure that you are aware of it. So let's say we don't want to introduce a new season count variable. So I'm going to delete this. I still want to use a for loop, but now I'm going to iterate over for I in, if I want to do the range, or use the range function here, I can pass in something like the length of seasons, right? So what would length of seasons be? In this case, it would be 4, right? Our example data here has 1, 2, 3, 4. And so if I did for I in range length of seasons, let's actually just, we know we're not using season count anymore, but just to remind ourselves what should happen here, well, let's make a prediction. We know range will go from 0 to 1 less than whatever we pass in here. And so this should go 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Because length of seasons is going to be 4. So let's just double check that that happens. And we see that it does. 0, 1, 2, 3, just like we thought. But you might note, hey, we don't want season 0, season 1, season 2, season 3. We want 1 through 4. Well, one nice thing is that the range function can actually take in multiple parameters. So if you pass in 2 parameters, range will interpret the first parameter as what you want to start at, and the second parameter as one more than where you want to stop. So for example, I'll just write myself a comment here, range of start, stop. It's called stop inside Python, but it's really one more than where you want to stop. So if we just go from 1 to length, if we just pass in 1 and length of seasons here, what are we going to get? Well, we're going to start at 1, but we're only going to go up to 3. Let's just run that and see if that's true. Yep. So we started at 1, but we ended at 3. And we actually want to end at 4, right? So what are we going to need to do? We're going to need to put our stop parameter as length of seasons plus 1. And then we will get 1 through 4, which is what we want. All right, so now instead of printing this index here, let's use it. What do we need that for? Well, that was our season count, right? So now our season count is I, but we no longer have this season variable, right? And so let's get that season variable. Well, what is I here? I is an index that we can use to get at these sublists in soccer seasons. So when I'm at index 1, I would like to be accessing the thing in the 0th position. So I'm going to say season is seasons at I minus 1. Because if I just said I would actually access the next thing. And so I believe this should work, but definitely need to test it out before I move on. And so here, let's check season 1, season 2, season 3, and it looks like I'm getting the correct games played. That last games played should be 20, points earned should be 30, and so that's looking good. So at this point, it looks like I'm successfully calling process seasons. Let me take out this pass. Maybe I can actually remove these comments. Oops, that was, yeah, seems fine. And I'll just double check I didn't mess anything up there. Great. So now I have completed my process seasons function, which is good. And I can move on to that process season function. And so what I need to do here is fill in logic to what? Figure out all combinations of wins, ties, and losses that could have resulted in the number of points for the number of games played. And so this will be the main challenge of this lab. I encourage you to get out a pencil and paper and think about how you can solve this. And if you're stuck, feel free to post in Slack. This can definitely be a hard one to get started on. So good luck and enjoy this lab. I think it's a pretty fun one.